They've got restaurants and movie theaters and hospitals and swimming pools, and I mean, for a factory, it's a pretty nice factory.
Apple recently emerged as the most valuable company in the world. Not only that, but it also has an iconic image of squeaky clean, progressive values, overlooking any sort of allegations made by the labor within its key Chinese supply chain. Today, let's dive in and take a look at Apple's iPhone factory in China and discover all the secrets that lie within. More than half of the world's iPhones are made at a factory complex called Foxconn, located in Zhengzhou, China. The company employs as many as 350,000 people and has spawned a mini-city that residents like to call iPhone City. We have insider knowledge about the lives of conditions, residents, shop owners, and factory workers, although we have heard allegations we were not expecting to hear stories about low pay and long hours.
Are there?
Around 141.
141 steps.
However, these stories are not too different from other factories in China. According to the workers, Foxconn is no better or worse than any of the other factories that they've worked at. However, only a few managed to talk about the grinding factory lifestyle at Foxconn, in which they work 6 days a week with frequent hours of overtime and only get to see their spouses once a week if they're lucky. So if you're using an iPhone or want to buy one, chances are it was made at a sprawling factory complex in Zhengzhou, China. We're a city of about 9.5 million people located in what is known as one of the country's poorest provinces, called Henan. Foxconn is run by Taiwanese electronics manufacturers and employs about 350,000 people. With a workforce that big, it manages to produce about half of the world's iPhones. Before the fall release of a new iPhone, the summer months are the busiest, with the factory producing 500,000 phones a day or up to 350 iPhones a minute. The Foxconn Zhengzhou Science Park is actually located more than 20 miles outside downtown Zhengzhou. It is separated by freeways, suburbs, and dirt scrublands.
The secret factory in China where Apple iPhones and iPads are made.
It has a workforce that rivals that of many U.S. cities, emerging as the iPhone City. In the city, there are dorms in 10 or 20-story buildings outside Foxconn's gates where factory workers live. Moreover, a migrating workforce of entrepreneurs and vendors like to set up shop below to make a living by cooking street food, selling socks and other knickknacks, or offering massages. These places aren't like cities. Thomas Dings, a senior principal analyst at the market research firm iSupply, told CKGSB Knowledge of the communities that form around Foxconn's 12 factories in China. They are cities. Insiders spent a day at the Foxconn factories in iPhone City and talked to factory workers, restaurant owners, and many others whose lives are affected by Foxconn. They got to the Foxconn Zhengzhou Science Park about 1 o'clock, which was just after workers' lunch break. Besides a few workers mulling around the gates, the factory was pretty much a ghost town.
We're all over this. Foxconn is not a sweatshop.
Considering the fact that the factory employs 350,000 of Foxconn's 1.3 million employees in China, it gave off quite an eerie vibe seeing it so empty. Having 1.3 million employees in mainland China, Foxconn is the country's largest private employer. Ever since it started producing iPhones for Apple in 2007, Foxconn has faced allegations from labor abuses to putting harsh penalties on workers who make mistakes to imposing poor working conditions. To further support these claims, there was a wave of suicides among Foxconn workers in 2010 and 2011 that finally prompted Apple and Foxconn to make changes around the factories. Since a worker had just killed himself at the Zhengzhou factory where the team from Insider visited, there were reports that the factory had more aggressive security than most military compounds, so it was easy to assume that getting in was going to be difficult. However, that was not the case when the team walked right past security into the campus.
Have you heard about people who have been dying at Foxconn, some people who committed suicide?
Upon entering the business park, you could see dozens of buildings spanning more than 2.2 miles with trees everywhere and police and security guards taking stand on every street corner while the workers that were on break could be seen camping out in the shade. If you compare this scenario to the one a decade ago, you would see a huge difference from the dirt and fields of corn and wheat that was visible before. However, it was in 2010 when the government bought out local farmers and got the factory up and running within the year. This complex was built in 2010 mostly to serve Apple's iPhone production needs. For this purpose, Apple got $600 million in assistance from the provincial government. And that's not the end of government assistance in the matter. Even now, there are tons of support provided by the government to Foxconn, including tax incentives and subsidies in order to keep the production running.
做过一些就是可能说在产线上加班比较多，时间比较长，然后有的可能说
All this paved way for new roads to the factory, helping cover energy and transportation costs, building power plants, and paying bonuses to the factory so they can meet export targets. According to the New York Times in 2016, during the first 2 years of production, the bonuses earned totaled $56 million. But the government's assistance is not just financial only. It also helps in recruiting, training, and housing workers for the factory when the peak iPhone production period begins, which is the summer months before the new iPhone launch. When this period starts, a speaker near the entrance can be heard saying, "We are recruiting the cream of society. Your personality must be optimistic, your work diligent." Furthermore, because Foxconn has a never-ending need for workers, the government's efforts are constantly required, such as the quotas enforced by the province for the number of workers that local villages and cities are required to provide to the factory. In 2016, there were also state-owned coal company workers lent to the factory. And in 2017, a Financial Times report said that trade schools required their students as young as 16 to work at the factory in order to gain work experience in order to graduate.
So a model happy employee. You're happy.
In the days leading up to the launch of the iPhone X, there are many students working overtime, something that is illegal under Chinese law. Talking to the Times in 2016, Liu Miao, head of a private recruiting center in Zhengzhou, said every city's Department of Labor and Ministry of Human Resources is involved. Workers that have the day shift start their day at the factory by streaming in through the factory's gates around 7 a.m. Most workers tend to walk from the nearby dorms or take a bus if the buildings they live in are a bit further away, and workers who can afford motor scooters ride those to the factory. 4 of the factory workers Insider spoke to described their daily schedule as waking up at 6:30 a.m., heading to the factory at 7, and then eating breakfast and starting work by 8. They then take an hour-long break for lunch, where most people eat at the canteen located inside the campus, whereas some workers like to head out to vendors outside since they believe the food is better. The shift then ends at 5 p.m.
Do you know these guys? Do you know their names? Do you know where they're from and all that kind of stuff?
However, if there is overtime offered, then most workers will work until 8 or 10, after which they are done with work, they grab dinner with friends or play video games until 10 or 11, after which they go to sleep. Now for the workers who are on the night shift, the schedule is pretty much the same, just imagine it flipped. The kind of work done at Foxconn's iPhone factory does final assembly, testing, and packaging, also known as FATP. This stage of manufacturing requires about 400 steps to complete assembling the iPhone. Most workers are likely to do just one task repeatedly all day. That task could be anything from polishing the screen, fitting a single screw into the back of the phone, or even soldering one component.
Companies have codes of conduct or standards that they apply to their factory partners in China.
Talking to one worker who was in charge of wiping a special polish onto the LCD screen told The Guardian that she handled 1,700 iPhones a day, or about 3 screens each minute for 12 hours a day. Other workers that have jobs like fastening chipboards can take up to a minute per iPhone, resulting in about 600 to 700 completed iPhones a day. While most workers at the factory are between the ages of 18 and 25, there are interns as young as 16 working as well. Among the employees that can be seen over the course of a day, there were an equal number of men and women. Most of these workers either coming from Zhengzhou or villages around Henan. Moreover, right outside the entrance gate to the factory is a makeshift district of low-slung storefronts that serve factory workers who are not a fan of Foxconn's canteen on campus.
Shenzhen is a city of 14 million people. It is large.
Many of these restaurant owners are former Foxconn employees, or people from nearby villages who wanted a chance to capitalize on the new factory. And that's a wrap on Inside Apple's iPhone factory in China. What do you think about the relevant question to the video? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. See you in the next one.